Welcome everyone. This is the webinar on development to deployment of a web application in Python. My name is Ramya. I do web development and Python mentoring, and I also write technical articles. Now, let's start on this. Today we are going to talk about the use cases of Python and quiz, what sort of applications we can do, like quiz applications and CRUD applications. This we are going to start from a beginner level to make sure all our participants are in same page. These are the resource links you can access for the presentation slides, and this is the project's URL link. And today's agenda for the series: use cases of Python, tools, libraries, database, and applications, what and how, walkthrough of the code and deployment, and any question and answers you have. Use cases of Python. We have a wide variety of applications we can build with Python. It is a multi-purpose language that is basically it is a versatile, right? And we can build full stack applications, desktop applications, game development with Python, and it can be used for software testing, web scraping, data analysis, machine learning and deep learning applications, NLP applications, and networking programs. Now, in this webinar, I'm going to talk about two types of applications. One is CRUD application and quiz web application. The tools and libraries will be used for these projects: Python, Django, and SQLite. Python is general purpose language, high level and object oriented. It's one of the good features are garbage collected, and it is interpreted language, and it is initially designed by Guido van Rossum. And Django is Python's web framework, and SQLite is the database where we can store data, and we can store and access data to and from the database. And for the deployment tools, these are some of the tools and open source tools. I'm going to talk about Heroku today. Through Heroku, I have deployed these applications, and I will walk through the steps and how what it takes to deploy an application to web. Basically, we do find quite a lot resources on developing in a local host. You want to present it to the outside world. So I was like, okay, let us cover this part, right, from end-to-end application. Once you have application developed in local host, if you want to present it or if you want to add it to your portfolio, there is some output has to be there to present it to the person who sees your portfolio or to whom you're talking or giving the presentation. So here today we are going to use one of such tools called Heroku, which is an open source platform. And this is one of the application, how it looks, the quiz application, wherein it provides a short info about how you can interact with the application. And this is the front page, landing page of the application. This is another application, which is basically a CRUD application. Yeah, I will walk through all of these ones. This is how the CRUD application it looks. Basically, CRUD application is create, read, update, delete. Whatever actions we perform, it is going to persist to the database. Yeah. So let's do that without. Yeah. So this is the application we are going to talk about. I will walk through the application at high level. When you land on the application, this is the landing page. Here, basically, we have designed the application with a couple of categories like general knowledge, Python, geography, food, STEM, and sports. For example, when you click on the general knowledge category, you would see these questions, and the user can choose the answer. Say, I'm just randomly picking up, and it would give you the feedback. So this is the pattern we have followed for rest of the categories. It would give, okay, for the question 1, answer what the user they have selected. And if the answer is wrong, it also gives which is the correct answer, right? I chose 1, but the correct answer for this is 3. Next, the correct answer is Sydney. And the correct answer is 11, but I chose 16. The correct answer is cherry blossom. I chose cherry blossom. And the correct answer is 365. Here, I chose the wrong answer Aztec, but the correct answer is Incon. Like this, it gives the feedback for the user. Next is on geography. It is same thing. User would select answer for the questions and just submit. It would give you the feedback for you have selected the answer was because it was blank, and also it will give you the feedback saying that correct answer is Sweden and correct answer is the Vatican. I chose only for these two. I did not choose for this. So whatever I chose, it's blank. I did not choose anything basically. So this is the navigation next. It moves on to the next category, that is Python and food and STEM and then sports. For this we have previous. Then any moment if user wants to go to the landing page, home. Yeah. So this is one type of application. And this is another application where it is a CRUD application. We can perform, we can create a record, we can fetch the rows from the database, and we can update specific record, and we can also delete a specific record. Here, this is by default, these are the records that will pull up onto the screen if user wants to see. Basically, for this use case could be any management, every company's management aspect. Every company will have a internal application where they will have their, it could be employees or it could be their staff, those kind of internal application they want to build. Basically, it will be with the CRUD operations. And here create to add a student. Here I can enter just, I would say that, and and I would say, yeah, insert record. You will get a feedback saying that, hello, the student's name is saved successfully. I would go to home page. There you go. You have the record inserted. And if you want to edit it, say Sarah, update record. Feedback saying that updated successfully. Go to home page and let's see, it's been updated. So these are the kind of applications we can build with Python. Now, if we go through walkthrough of the application, one of the applications I will walk through. Say, if you are new to Python, Django, creating projects, first you have to, I will open up the this one, yeah. If you are completely beginner to Python or new to Python, you have to install Python in your machine. We have two options. One, you can install it via Anaconda, and another one you can install it via python.org downloads. The advantage of installing with Anaconda is it also comes with other tools such as Jupyter Notebook, VS Code, so many other tools. It will come with all the tools under one roof. And you can use those either of the way, either using Anaconda, or if you want to install only the Python, you can go to this website. And when you visit either of the websites, that would advise which file to download based on your operating system. And Anaconda lets you install other tools such as Jupyter, VS Code, and many more. Please make sure you install Python 3, because Python 2 and its support uh, are deprecated and are in process to completely not to be supported. And please make sure you install the libraries dependencies within the virtual environment, not globally. Unless the specific ones, you would install it globally. Otherwise, most of the third-party libraries you would install in virtual environment to keep the consistency and compatibility between the libraries and the framework versions. Because when you have more than one Python projects, and one project would be having different version Python, and another project can have another version Python, there won't be any clashes of the compatibility between the libraries and the Python version itself. And how do you set up the environment? Virtual environment, how do you create? You say Python -m stands for module. VN is one of the module to create the virtual environment. And once you create virtual environment, you would say for Windows, this is how you activate. This is the virtual environment name, \scripts and \activate. And for Mac, if you have Mac operating system, then you would say source. This would be your virtual environment name, /bin/activate. And these are a couple of the tips. If you want to know detail about the specific module or library, you would say pip show random. In the command line tool, you have to type these ones. And if you say pip list, that will give you the list of libraries you have installed with version. And whatever you would have installed, the libraries or modules, you want to keep a note of what you have installed, you can save them to requirements.txt file using this command. You don't have to manually add each library or module you would have installed. If you run this command, that does the work for you. And once you have installed it, and for example, this is the scenario for where I want to deploy it. To deploy, I don't have to have a virtual environment to be pushed to the Git, for example, right? Then I would create another directory in which I'm going to keep only the files which I can push it to the deployment server. That's when this comes very handy to install the dependencies required using the requirements.txt using this command. Or I'm working on the enhancement of another project. So my colleague would pass on their project to me for me to do the next development. Then I would run this command. Okay, it's if you are coming from JavaScript background, it is similar to package.json. And once you have activated your virtual environment and you install virtual environment, you activated virtual environment, and then make sure you install any modules or libraries you install. Once you install the Django application, you have to create a project. For that, you would use Django admin start project, and this is the project name. And once you created the project, then you have to start a server. Then you would say the command python manage.py run server. So this is basically how you see it in the terminal. Python manage.py run server and hit enter. That would open up the local host and the port. Next, if you have more than one Python application, you have more than one Python application is running, you can even change the port number and run. Once you create the Django application, the folder structure would be this. This is my root directory, in which it creates another project. When you create Django-admin start project and project name, right? This is the structure of the Django project. This is the app. This app gets created once you run this application. Python manage.py start app name. And now, what are the contents of the Django structure? When you create a Django project, these are the default files that gets created with the framework. Now, what is WSGI? It is Web Server Gateway Interface. When you create a Python application and deploy to the Heroku or platforms, it uses this web server. I will walk you through that eventually when we move on to the deployment session. And then this is the virtual environment I created for this project. So whatever packages or dependencies you would install once it is activate, that gets installed within this folder. It is same as node_modules if you have worked with JavaScript. And these are the database file, it gets created, and manage.py gets created, and requirements.txt. Make sure this will be in the root folder, that is this project's folder. Now, next step is to create Django app. Python pyquiz_portal_app. This is the app name I gave when I created Django app. There it gets created these files like admin.py, apps.py, models.py, tests.py, and views.py. Now, what are these? Views.py, it is basically you create a function for each template, each view, right? You want to visit to the home page, you have to create a function for that. You want to visit to Q&A page, that is for example, Q&A page, okay, quiz page, right? For Python page, right? For that, I would write a function. When it is clicked on that, Django knows which URL it can pick up and where it can navigate to. This function does that kind of functionality, navigating to which template it should be navigated to. And also, when you render it, I can pass, this is the content I have stored in this database and passed on to this key, and please take this data and render those content to this template file. Here, template is nothing but a HTML files. And for quiz, for each page, you have to create a function in views.py for food, for STEM, for sports. And now models, it is basically creating tables for the data. Here I have created a table for each category. And this is how you declare the data type for each field. These are the field names, nothing but column names: category, question, question 1, question 2, question 3, question 4, and correct answers. And this is the table name I have given, and likewise created another table for STEM category, and created another table for sports category. And now admin is the place where you register each of the table or model you have created. That's how the Django knows, okay, this is from where I have to pick up the data and render it onto the front end. And these are the static files. It can be CSS and images and JavaScript files you would use for the application. Yeah, so templates. Next. So this is how we run the application locally. Because I have given this command, that's how you are able to see the application running locally. Yeah, here, right? It's 8,000 the port, and by default it takes the port as 8,000 unless you specify here any other port number. Like, because I have opened a CRUD application also, so there I have changed the port number. By default, this is the one. See here, 8008. This is another application I have running. Yeah. So next, now we have everything done locally. It is working. Everything is fine. Now I want to show it. I want to present it. I want to have a URL link for my application, right? There are so many OSS platforms, open source software platforms that help us to see our web applications and ideas in action. During my initial days, I was asked to show output of my UI or web application I have done. So I decided to explore open source tools to deploy my application that I can share what I have done. And if I keep whatever I have done locally, I won't be able to present it. So that's one of the good use case of open source tools when we want to show ideas, for example, to even to build the MVPs and things like that. And some of the tools I have come across is Heroku, Gitpod, Netlify, and Firebase, and there are many more. Today, we are going to talk about the Heroku. Coming to the deployment part and the database side, we have the another series, API series. Watch out for that, where we are going to talk about the database in depth, including showing you the database, everything, how the data is fetching from the back end to the front end. It's a complete cycle of application. We are going to demo it. In few weeks, we are going to do that series. Where we can talk about more about those deployments from, okay, the front end, how it is connected to API layer, how it is connected to database, and each its integrations and configurations we are going to show those ones. So you may be having questions here, but you will get clarified in those series. Next. These are the prerequisites we need to deploy to Heroku. Each platform will have its specific requirements. For Heroku, these are the 4 major requirements what the Heroku server looks for, what kind of app server or web server it uses. It uses Gunikan, right? This is the app server, Gunikan. There is a it uses Gunikan. It is app server to keep the application running. How do you install it? Using pip install Gunikan. Now, what are other prerequisites we need for the deployment? Proc file, requirements txt, and runtime txt. Make sure they are in the source folder. This is how the proc file looks. In this, you have to specify the Gunikan, that is app name, and the project name you have given, and the path where it is. This one, but you don't have to specify .py extension for that. This is how the proc file looks. Next, we need to have a requirements.txt file. In that, you have to state which are the dependencies you have used and their versions. You don't have to manually add them. If you run this command, that does the work for you by adding the specific version of the specific dependency. And runtime. In the runtime, you would mention which is the Python version you are going to use. These three files are quite important and they have to be in the root folder. Next, if you are new to Heroku, these are the steps you need to follow for you to deploy it. Now, you have to install Heroku CLI tool. How do you install it? This needs to be installed globally. -G stands for global. npm install -G Heroku. Here. Right. You can check once you have installed whether Heroku is installed or not. I tried in this way. If this is a verification, if the Heroku is not installed in your machine, this is what message you are going to get. Once you install it, especially globally, you have to install it. Once you install it, this is the message it gives you and how many packages it has installed and other more details to it and any updated versions or anything you need to update. Next, if you check Heroku version, this also verifies if the Heroku is existing in the machine where we are developing the application. So this is how it says. This is the version, this is what is the operating system and the node version you are running. Once you have done that, you have to say Heroku login. That would take you to, by the way, also you need to have a account in Heroku. You don't have to pay anything. You can create the account freely without paying, and you can also do a couple of the projects, especially research or study projects. Once you have the account ready, and you would say Heroku login, the command. Just now I showed. Yeah, Heroku login. Then it would take you to the web browser, and here you will get instructions like this, right? Press any key to open up browser to log in. Then the browser would open up, and then you can come to the command prompt and you can enter. But once you have logged in already in the browser, that would take it automatically in the command line prompt. It will detect it. And then once you have it, you can navigate to the directory in which you are keeping the files can be deployed in one directory, right? I named this directory as this one. I know only what exactly files I want to deploy. For example, virtual environment, I don't want to deploy. So you can also even add git ignore file to make sure those won't be added when you add git to the repository. To view the files and directories, you can say dir in Windows. And once you have that, that will give you the list of directories and files in the directory from which you are going to fetch and deploy it. And then you would create the Heroku project using the command Heroku create and the application name. This is already existing, so it will give me feedback saying that okay, underscore is not allowed in the naming convention of the Heroku project. And next, when I created with the hyphens, it said this name is already taken. So I chose this name. Now, okay, it created this project for me. Okay. Let me log into this by then. Okay. So once you enter your password, everything, you have to connect your application to the remote Git repository. This is how we do it. You say Heroku git remote -a and the app name, which one you are linking the project to the Git remote application. And then you make sure you are in the virtual environment, activated everything, but not in the middle of the application. Next. So when I install from the pip install, yeah, and once you have made all the changes you need, when you try to push it to the remote repository, this is how it says, okay, so and so files have been pushed, because it was a long list of directories and files I was checking in to the remote repository. So it is this long. Nearly done for the next command. Yeah. So this is the feel of what, when you enter this command, what happens, right? And then once you link the Heroku project with remote Git application, these are the next commands you can say. You can say git status to see which are the files are modified, or which are the files are tracked, which are untracked, which you want to add it to the Git remote. When you do git status, it will give you all those files, and then you would say git add space dot. This you have to make sure, otherwise it will throw error. And then you have to give a message when you commit it. Git commit -m for message. Within the double quotes, you have to specify the specific message, and then you would say git push Heroku master, right? I will show you how it works, because it got logged out, my Heroku. So yeah. So yeah, this is the just now I created the project, and before that I had done for this application, right? This is how I have linked. Once you have done this command, say git push Heroku master, this is how it will be. See here all the configurations and the git remote, it will be there. You have the option, you can link your GitHub repo to the Heroku, or you can use Heroku's Git repository. Here I have used Heroku's Git repository. Yeah, when you use the proc file, that is how the server reads it. Okay, now I know Unicorn app server been used. Now it knows what to be done next. That's how you pass the information through these proc file, requirements txt for dependencies, and runtime for which Python version you are using for the application. And then, yeah, these are some of the resources for further explore about virtual environment. If you have any platform specific questions, say there are slight changes for commands. For Windows, it changes a bit in specific areas like when you activate the virtual environment, for example, operating system specific commands. For Windows, you would do this. For Mac, you would do this. That kind of changes. For that, you can refer to the documentation, and even for the Django project, and Heroku for OS specific installations. And the things, yeah. Anyone has any questions? Now, okay. So I will take up the questions. Let's see some. Yeah, feel free to ask any questions you have. So there are, it's Python is basically a language that can be used for versatile use cases. And feel free to share if you have used any other open source tools you would have used for deployment. Yeah, Heroku is different from GitHub. GitHub is basically a repository, a directory in which you are going to store your code bases, right? Okay, it's a central repository. I have a team of 5 members, and each one is working on certain part of the project. So I'm going to create a repository for my project. To that central repository, all the 5 members code can be checked in, can be pushed. It is basically a place to store the code base, whereas Heroku is to deploy it. Yeah, there is a question. Definitely, yeah. So, yes. Okay, the question one, which deployment platform do you recommend most? Well, it is really your preference, but I would prefer Heroku because it has a very good community, and if you need any support or any troubleshooting, you can definitely, you have good sources, good documentation, you can fix the troubleshooting. I had quite a few platforms specific troubleshooting things I had to do, and not just one resource helped me to fix the issue I was going through to deploy. So in this, the handbook, in this, I have, articulated all those steps, including the troubleshooting and all those things. So I made this documentation, and also I will show you in the code structure what all changes I had to make for it to work from the local to hosting server, what changes happens, including the fold structure. I will show you that in a moment. Can I use PyCharm as IDE? Definitely you can, yeah. Will you have future sessions to go into depth about parts of the process you showed us today, such as how to add records to the database, how to utilize the database, data in the views? Definitely, we are going to cover this in our next series. Yeah. And so the fold structure, right? Yeah, so here, when you create a Django project, basically I had to merge some of the project folder into the app in terms of the data JSON file, right? I thought I can keep it in the root directory. This is how I have added the question and things before I moved on to the database. You can use JSON as well. Yeah, this we are going to go into deep about integrating how we are making it into API layer and adding it to the database in our next meeting. This is basically a beginner level to give you the how the database Django, Python, all are put together, and you make it end to end one application, and how you can bring your ideas into action, right? Doing it locally is absolutely fine, but when you want to present it in terms of you are building your portfolio, you are presenting your work, you have gone to interview, you are talking about what you have done, and okay, you are doing the consultation and they're asking you to show some of your work you have done before, these are the one of the good usages. You can put those into practice, the deployment open source tools, right? That's when it helped me to build sort of what my clients were asking question. Okay, I have done these kind of applications, yes, I can do their project, and that's how I also add features to their application, and they'll be okay. It will also help them to visualize what features you can add for them. It basically, when you add value to people, definitely it makes an impact, and that would help you to present yourself how you can bring their ideas into action, right? And where these are the ones, these are the major files. It has to be in the root folder of the project, and you don't have to have a virtual environment folder, and the static files it gets generated, that is required for the deployment purpose. And once you create all these three files, other important thing you have to do is come to the app, Django app, in which I have merged another subfolder application into within the app folder. Otherwise, I was not able to deploy it. These are some of the troubleshooting tips you need to keep in mind, that when you're deploying Heroku. Other than these kind of deployment fixes, Heroku I would definitely suggest. It's not that you go to another tool, there won't be there will be a 0% fixes. Definitely every single tool or platform will have something or the other, their specific way of deploying it. In every tool, it will have its own ways to fix it when there is a deployment issues come. In the settings mainly, right? Once you created these three requirements in the root folder, you have to specify the project's URL. That is from where you get it, right? The next question. Yeah, here, I mean there, if you go there in the settings, you would find that applications URL here. From here, you can copy, or even it will display in the terminal. From there also you can copy. And you have to make sure that you will add it in the allowed hosts. Next change you have to make is in the here, static root, right? This has to be added for fetching static files. You may see empty here, but behind the scenes, when you deploy it to the Heroku server, those static files will have the required files for it to read from there. And then this is the additional ones you have. So these were some of the fixes I had to do. Step 1 in the settings, and step 2, I had to merge a couple of the files. Rather than having them in 2 different folders, I had to keep them in all one folder, and then made sure all these 3 files are in the root directory. And this I had to install and make sure you pass the settings method, and you pass in this argument. And now you have an idea that, okay, how the field of deployment works. And next step would be to go deep into the database in terms of, okay, using, for example, using the CRED application. Using the CRED application, I added it. But behind the scenes, how it is getting recorded, that would be in the next webinar series. I'm going to cover what behind the scenes in the database, how it happens when the actions are performed in the front end, what happens in the database. To visualize, I will show you the database and all those things, how it happens, because in this 1 hour session, it's like I don't want it to overwhelm. To take one step ahead, now you have seen in action front end and the types of applications, and when you perform this kind of actions, you want to see them in the action, right? We have quite a lot resources we can study on development, but with respect to deployment, that's when one of the challenge I faced. I wanted to make this, okay, I wanted to cover after the deployment, what next? I want to see that in action. So that's how happened. We did this webinar, and we are going to take next by showing its action, what happens in the database, right? So yeah, let me take the questions. Can we use Jupyter Notebook and then create a PY file for the deployment? Definitely you can do that. If you are not comfortable with any of the IDEs, you can do these codes in Jupyter Notebook and then get the PY file. But when you convert the Python file from the Jupyter Notebook, you have to make sure, as you have to clean the files, when you convert from Jupyter to Python file, there are so many lines you get which are unwanted, uncommented. You have to make sure you will clean those files. Rather, I would suggest either use VS Code or PyCharm, things like that. There are community editions are available in that, which are good enough for this scale of applications. Next, what's the advantage of using Python and Django for web development over using HTML, CSS, JavaScript? Yeah, good question. Say HTML, CSS, with the combination of HTML, CSS, you would basically create a static websites. And JavaScript, you would be able to add some of the interactions in terms of animations, or in terms of, for example, forms. User will submit the form, right? And they will enter the form details, and user clicks on the submit button. What happens next? It has to go to the database for it to get stored. So when you use only HTML, CSS, JavaScript, there won't be data stored to the database, right? You need to have some database. Whereas with Python and Django, Python is a language that can communicate with the database. Whereas HTML cannot communicate with the database. There has to be a backend language between the front end and the database. Front-end languages cannot talk to the database directly. There has to be languages like Python, PHP. They can talk to the database. There will be techniques like either ORM feature you can use, or you can use conventional SQL queries you can write within the Python or PHP to talk to the database, right? Whereas with HTML, you cannot talk to the database. Nowadays, JavaScript, yes, node you can use to connect to the database, right? Along with Python, PHP, Node, such languages are required to integrate database to our application for data persistence. Hope I answered your question. Feel free to ask it if you're not clear. So, let me share again my GitHub repo, which was sharing available. Currently have yeah, I can share this in which I have presentation ones. If you need to, and we are going to update it with what we have showed in the webinar today. Yeah. So yeah. So and any other questions you have, or feel free to ask any questions you have. And these are our Slack channel for help. For example, you are doing any application, you need help in deployment, feel free to send us the message and join our Slack channel. Yeah. And I will take up a few more questions. You created a test for this project. Initially, I did do that, but it started working. So rather than focusing on the test, I next completely focused on the development. And then I looked at, okay, do I have any errors locally? And application is running. I also test in another web browser. Say for the development, I use Chrome. And then once in the locally itself, I check in Firefox or any other browser to make sure, okay, it is functioning and there are no errors before I deploy it in the console. And then I just focused on deployment part because this is the scale of the application. So yeah, I did not much focus on the testing. Will the code be posted on GitHub for us to deploy it on Heroku? Yes, you can try that. I will update them soon. And then you can use that if you want to deploy it on the Heroku, and feel free to message us in the Slack if you need any help in deployment to troubleshoot any of the issues you're going through. Would you typically create, test for front and backend or just backend? You can do testing for database testing is also there. You can do those testing as well. And for front end, you do UI testing in terms of, okay, when we have application and how manually we are going to test, right? Does this feature is working? Does that feature is working? So for those, we can automate for front end features, yes. Basically, I do for front UI testing. I do initially, and it definitely depends on the scale of the application and the requirements by the client. Hope you had something to learn from this webinar, and something you learned and something to take away. And thank you everyone for joining. It's a pleasure talking. Thank you so much. And watch for us to have the next session on databases and integrations. We are going to go to the next step. Thank you everyone.